trying to take justice in their own hands. They want the assassins, and the authorities trying to prevent that. And you see the new acting president calling for the opening up of Haiti in this kind of situation. And as I mentioned before, COVID is raging in that country. It's not an easy thing to do. So I think we'll have to monitor this situation in Haiti and see how it unfolds. But it is very, very problematic indeed and very uncertain as we go forward. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning and for viewing. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe, and we hope to have you every morning, Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Right now, I have a very important guest on this show. We just had Marlene Atz with a very clear and precise contribution about the state of the economy. We will continue that conversation. And we have now Professor Pathmanathan Umaharan, who is a plant geneticist at the University of the West Indies and currently head of the Cocoa Research Unit. Morning, Professor Umaharan, how are you?
Good morning, I am fine, how are you?
Very good. We want to talk this morning to you about what's happening in agriculture in the country, but I want to start where you are strongest, that is to say in the research area and the genetics area, to talk about some of the things that have been done at UWI. Before you went to the Cocoa Research Institute, you were in the Department of Agriculture at UWI, and you did some remarkable things. You did some work on peppers, you did some work on anthuriums and the genetics of flowers and other things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, good morning. Good morning to your viewers. Yeah, I'm a geneticist, and when I started my career, the objective was really to look at the varieties that are grown in Trinidad and Tobago, and to see some of the problems that the farmers are facing, and whether we can solve those problems using genetic methodologies, genetics and breeding. So I started my work early, looking at crops like bodi and black eyed peas and so on, trying to look at resistance to two major diseases, Cercospora leaf spot, which is a leaf spot disease that affects yields, and cowpea severe mosaic virus, which is a virus disease that affects yields. So I was trying to breed for resistance, and I was very successful in getting varieties that are highly resistant to the two diseases. What it means to the farmer is that the farmer does not have to spray chemicals as they used to spray regularly to control these diseases. So therefore, it reduces the cost of production for farmers. Then I moved on to working with...
So you solved that problem, and is that now manifest in the production system in Trinidad for bodi, and what was the other plant you said?
Black eyed peas.
Black eyed peas. But we don't grow a lot of black eyed peas here, do we? And well, I know bodi grows, but has the research that you have done transferred into the production system in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, I will say to some extent. One of the problems we are having in Trinidad and Tobago in general is that we don't really have a seed policy where varieties are officially released into agriculture, and then there should be a system to multiply the seeds and then distribute the seeds to the farmers. So on the top end, you can do the breeding of varieties, but then you need to have a system that takes those varieties, multiplies them, and then makes them available to farmers. Usually in the system that operates in Trinidad and Tobago is where, most of the varieties that are grown are imported and sold to farmers. And so there's no local system that supplies to these garden shops. And therefore, that it's made available to the farmers. So where we are failing is regard to that take up by farmers, which requires that sort of system put in place where the varieties are taken. And this has been a problem, and I have been lobbying, for what we call a seed policy, where there's a system of evaluating varieties independently of the breeder, and releasing officially by the government, and perhaps having a system of local multiplication and distribution to the garden shops so that farmers can get these varieties to them.
I want to summarize and emphasize that there is a problem from research to the production of seeds, and eventually the multiplication of seeds and the supply system that eventually gets it to the farmer. So that's the first issue, and that is a problem that remains to be solved. Okay? All right. But you were going on, beyond that, you did other work.
Yeah, so at the time, during the early 2000s, the Anthurium industry was really prospering in Trinidad, and the ornamental industry in general. And Trinidad and Tobago was exporting into the US and Canadian markets. And Trinidad and Tobago at that time was the largest exporter of tropical ornamentals into the North American market. So there was a very booming industry, and we thought at that time that Trinidad and Tobago could become one of the major suppliers into the East Coast of the United States and Canada. And at the time, two diseases really struck and devastated the industry. And one was a disease called bacterial blight. And then there was another disease called bacterial leaf spot. From being one of the largest exporters into the North American market, we very quickly, within a few years, we became almost non-existent in the export market. And that is because of these two diseases.
What years are we talking about there?
This would have been in 2003, 4, 5. Those years, there was a serious decline. And I say, so at that time, there were three problems. These two diseases and nematodes. And nematodes that came imported with the planting material from Holland had started devastating the industry. So we started a breeding program. We looked at the genetics of the disease resistance, and we found very high levels of resistance in the local pink varieties. Most of you all would know that there's these local pink Anthurium varieties, which are not very attractive because they have a very floppy kind of spathe, but they have very high levels of resistance. So through breeding, we were able to transfer the resistance to the two diseases from this variety into these elite, beautiful varieties. And so these varieties, when we developed it, this was the first in the world, and there were many countries really at that time clamoring to get hold of these varieties, because these were a problem not only in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean, but also throughout the tropical world. Because at that time, all the breeding of Anthuriums was done in Holland, and it was distributed to the rest of the world. And these varieties were very susceptible to tropical diseases. So having developed this variety, we thought here is an option to get these varieties not only to the Trinidad market, but maybe commercialized internationally, so we can really get considerable foreign exchange through supplying planting material to the tropical world. So that was the intention. And so these varieties, we had a semi-commercial tissue culture lab. I converted one of the labs that we had in the university into a semi-commercial lab so that we could multiply it and start and test it. And we did testing in a farm in Trinidad called Kyrie Blooms. Based on that study, we found that some of these varieties were doing extremely well under those conditions. But again, you need to have a system to mass propagate these varieties to supply to farmers, and that requires a commercial tissue culture lab. And many of the small islands, which have a very strong banana industry, have very good commercial labs, tissue culture labs that produce and distribute material, this planting material, such as banana and plantains. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't really have a very private sector run commercial laboratory, tissue culture laboratory that was able to multiply this and distribute it across Trinidad and Tobago. So again, this provides considerable promise, but has not really been realized in a big way. So the anthurium industry in Trinidad and Tobago still continues to flounder in many ways. So,
is there still an opportunity there for private sector investment?
I think that's tremendous opportunity. I think, and this is one of the reasons why I think we need to bring private sector into the system, because they will operate in a way to maximize their profits, and in that process, they will ensure that the material is available to farmers locally as well as internationally. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for investment in this area.
Okay, so there is an opportunity for the earning of foreign exchange by having the private sector intervene now that the research has been done and creating the conditions for the production of anthuriums and exporting these, first of all, in terms of exporting the plant variety to tropical countries. So there is one opportunity there. And secondly, for the production of the flowers themselves to the non-tropical countries, basically
Yes.
those countries that would import the anthuriums, etc. But the other thing that you did with anthuriums, you mentioned the pink anthurium. What you did was, I remember when I was principal at the university, you had created every color of anthuriums from absolute white to absolute black and several colors in between. And that is now, does that intellectual property rights reside with you and in Trinidad and Tobago and the University of the West Indies, or is it now available everywhere?
Yeah, so I think, so what we did also was that you are right in saying that we were trying to also make what would make our anthuriums unique. In that, we have something that others don't have, right? So one was to create a large range of diversity in colors. That the market would demand. And one of the colors that was really missing in the anthurium collection of colors was a blue or a purple hue, a strong purple hue. And,
I remember the
and so what we were doing is that we were looking at other methods of, because traditionally anthurium does not have that hue. So usually in breeding, we are able to sort of hybridize and intermingle the genes to create new colors. But because this blue color doesn't at all exist in anthuriums, you need to create it by creating a new biochemical pathway. So that requires something called bioengineering. So we used a new methodology to engineer a pathway that does not exist in anthuriums. And so that, you could create these new colors that do not exist. But this part of the research didn't really go so far because of the lack of biosafety regulations in Trinidad and Tobago, which does not allow us to do any testing outside the laboratories. So the work was done in the laboratory, but was never taken outside because we did not have the biosafety laws and regulations. So in 2006, there was a biosafety committee that was established by the government of Trinidad and Tobago that looked at a policy, and the policy was developed in 2016 and was tabled in the cabinet, but was only approved in 2016 or 2015 or 2016, very late, many years after. And even now, for the time being, that Trinidad and Tobago still does not have any laws or regulations governing genetic engineering and the safe release of varieties coming out of this technology. So I have also been involved in the regional biosafety system to try to bring this about in the CARICOM. And many countries in the CARICOM have gone forward who don't even really have much research in this technology. But Trinidad and Tobago is still lagging behind in many ways in terms of getting the right laws and regulations and safety systems in place so that these technologies can really have an impact on the ground. So to say that these varieties, this technology has been commercialized, it has not been because of the lack of, again, the policy and regulatory systems in the country.
But we have the intellectual property rights to what you are doing here in terms of the creation of these varieties. Okay, so that's a very important thing to know. So I want to summarize what you've said so far. We don't have a seed policy and an effective seed system for Bodhi and black-eyed peas, which we can deploy in Trinidad and Tobago and make a significant difference in quality production and resistant to diseases in Trinidad and Tobago. That is the first thing. Secondly, in the area of anthuriums, we have the intellectual property rights, and we have the opportunity for private sector to intervene, both to distribute the varieties that we've created here, which are extremely resilient in the world in tropical climates, and the capacity to generate production in Trinidad and Tobago by planting and to export. And thirdly, we do not have the biosafety rules and regulations that are necessary to do the testing to improve the number of colors of anthuriums that we can produce, which would enhance the capacity for exports of the products because of the variety it would introduce to anthurium lilies in the world system. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. Yep.
All right, thank you very much. Can you go on to something else?
Okay. Yeah, so I think,
I hope I can get the Minister of Agriculture to come to talk to me about this, because these are the things that we should be dealing with, and we are not dealing with them at all. Go ahead.
The pepper, yeah, so the other industry that I worked on was in the hot pepper industry. And again, the story continues, you know, where the hot pepper industry was a very important export commodity from Trinidad and Tobago, because Trinidad and Tobago's hot peppers were highly regarded in the North American market, right? And then what happened was that the varieties that were released by Cardi, and it was commercialized. And then what happens is that these varieties were taken to the market, and many countries like Dominican Republic, Colombia, and Costa Rica would have collected those same varieties and started planting and producing these peppers at a lower cost of production, so that we were sort of, in many ways, we were pushed out of the export market. And this is my understanding. So we had a meeting with a lot of these producers of hot pepper, exporters of hot pepper, and researchers. And one of the things that we identified was that the cost of production of hot peppers in Trinidad and Tobago was very high, and as a result, it was not competitive in the international market. So one of the solutions that I thought of in the hot pepper was that our production of hot pepper our productivity levels are not very high. Our hot pepper productivity levels varies from about 12,000 kilograms per hectare to about 20,000 kilograms per hectare. You know, so the yields are very modest, I would say. Some farmers are getting better yields, but generally that's the average that we are getting, right? So if we can double that yield, our cost of production will go by half, because you spend almost the same amount of money, but you get much better yields. So our thrust in research was, how do you increase the production from this range of like 12 to 20 to maybe 30 to 40 tons per hectare, and so that our cost of production decreases, and immediately we become commercially viable in the export market. And that needs breeding for higher yields. So a lot of my work that I would have done was really to collect genetic material from throughout the Caribbean region, from Belize right down to Suriname. We collected a whole range of varieties. And over the years, with a lot of my postgraduate students, we have looked at these varieties, we evaluated them, and we have found some very promising varieties that have much better yields than the varieties that we grow. The second thing we wanted to do was to convert these varieties into hybrids, so that somebody else cannot steal these varieties and start growing them in their own countries and compete with us again with the same varieties. So that meant you need to convert these varieties into hybrids. Now, as you know, hybrid varieties, you cannot take the seeds and grow them again. You need to buy seeds from the breeder year after year. And that's one of the reasons why the international seed market has really gone the hybrid way, because that provides them the opportunity to make revenue out of the breeding work that has actually been invested. So increasing the yield and converting these varieties into hybrid has the potential for not only bringing back Trinidad and Tobago as a forerunner in the international pepper scene, but also again providing seed materials to the tropical world. And I think that Trinidad and Tobago being small, we really cannot, our scale of production really cannot be very large, but we have this potential to become an international tropical seed market for tropical seeds. And there's a lot of potential there, because the Caribbean region it falls between the two mega centers of diversity, the Central American mega center and South American mega center of diversity. And throughout historical times, the Caribbean has been the mechanism through these seeds were moved between Central and South America. And therefore, it's referred to sometimes as the Caribbean bridge. So a lot of these extension varieties from these centers of diversity exist in the Caribbean. So Caribbean is very rich in terms of diversity of these varieties. And if you can convert them into varieties that are commercially produced and marketed, it offers a tremendous opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago to become a foreign exchange earner across the tropical world. And Trinidad and Tobago has several qualities of reputation. Trinidad and Tobago used to have the Imperial College of Tropical Agriculture, where we have technicians from all over the tropical world in the Commonwealth who were trained in Trinidad and Tobago and were then distributed to the tropical countries around the world. And most of these people have become directors and so on. And they all have a very high regard for Trinidad and Tobago as a country where tropical agriculture originated and was disseminated throughout the world. So here we have a potential to reclaim that reputation as a producer not only of goods, but also services, like seed services, and supplying the rest of the world with these seeds. And hot pepper, anthuriums, these are all neotropical species. So, we have a tremendous advantage of using those and capitalizing on the diversity we have and converting them into potential foreign exchange earners for the country.
Okay, so what you are talking about is not only peppers and pepper seeds and the hybridization of that, but you're talking about the use of the knowledge that we have accumulated over time and the reputation to apply this hybridization technique to a range of plant origination material for distribution in tropical areas. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So we call all the species that are, we call it neotropical species because they are coming from the new world, right? So
yes,
a lot of this, the old world species, there's a lot of competition for breeding. A lot of countries are breeding in India and Southeast Asia and so on, Africa and so on. But these neotropical species have not been really capitalized on and distributed to the whole world, where most of the market is.
Okay, two issues here. So how far have we gotten in terms of doing the work that is necessary in hybridization of pepper to recapture a level of control of the market? What do we need to do? Or have we done what is required, or what do we need to do now?
Okay, so to start with, what we have done is that the genetic resources is the basis of all the work that we do. So what we did, we collected the pepper genetic resources that is available in this particular species called Capsicum chinense, which is the pepper that is grown in the Caribbean. The mainstream pepper that is grown around the world is called Capsicum annuum. This is the chili pepper. And that is a different species from Capsicum chinense, which is the hot pepper that we consume in the Caribbean region, right? So the Capsicum annuum has spread right through the world. It's called ANNUUM, annuum. And that has gone all over the world. And this is the chili peppers, the jalapenos, the sweet peppers, and so on. They belong to one particular species. As in other species called Capsicum chinense, which is the pepper that we grow, the pimentos and the hot peppers that we grow. And that was domesticated in the Caribbean. And it's not extensively produced or grown anywhere else in the world. So in other words, we have a prime opportunity to take these species and convert these into commercial varieties and take it to the rest of the world. So that is why I started by collecting varieties from throughout the Caribbean and comparing them. Suriname. And we have over 400 varieties that we have collected, and we have characterized them, and we have compared them using molecular techniques. And we found that the varieties that originate from the Caribbean is very distinctive from the varieties that are found in South and Central America. So we have a very pool, and that is possibly because genetic pool. That's possibly because the Caribbean region perhaps domesticated these highly pungent varieties, because as you would know that Central and South America, they don't really consume very hot food, right? So the pungent varieties are being domesticated here, and that is why a lot of the variability for this type resides in the Caribbean. So what we have done is we recently had a postgraduate student who did his PhD, who studied the genetics to understand how this is genetically controlled, all these characteristics that contribute to yield. And now, having understood it, we have now a very sound basis to build a breeding program to produce very good varieties with high yields. Now, just to give you a comparison, Capsicum annuum that is domesticated in Mexico and is now throughout the world. This is the chili peppers, the jalapenos, the serranos, sweet peppers. These ones produce yields over 100 tons per hectare. 100 tons per hectare. Wow. We are in 20 tons per hectare range. So if we can get our peppers to that range, I think we could replace a lot of these other mainstream peppers with the new type of peppers that we are producing.
And you think that that is doable?
That is very, very doable, yeah.
Okay, what do we need to do, first of all, with peppers now, given where you have reached on the knowledge side, the research side, the acquisition of a gene pool, the build-up that you've had of researchers and graduate students and the ongoing work? What do we need to do now to begin to capitalize on this knowledge in the market?
Okay, yeah, so, again, this is where the gap relies, right? So because the university rewards people for publications, right? And because you do research and publications and so on. Now, using the knowledge that is created and converting them into varieties is a process of breeding, you know, and the breeding is art and science, right? And you need to have breeders who can contribute their lifetime to breeding these varieties. Now, if you go into North American universities, the universities hire people as breeders, right? So if you look at wheat breeding in North America and particularly in US and Canada, you will see a continuous breeding within these universities for about over 100 years of corn and wheat and all those things. So, and creating intellectual properties, which brings tremendous revenue to the universities. And many universities are making a lot of their resources, money is based on these intellectual properties. Now, here, you know, in the system in the Caribbean, in UWI in particular that I'm talking about, we do a lot of science, but then the developmental part is left to the government to do. And so we don't encourage, we don't have resources to do breeding. We don't have breeders who are full-time doing breeding in the university system to convert this knowledge into commercial products. And that is a gap that I think if Trinidad and Tobago wants to become a knowledge economy, right, trading knowledge and converting it into commercial products and marketing it, I think this is one of the gaps that we need to really, as a country, plug, so that, you know, we can really get these science, very good science that happens at the university, into commercial products, you know. And so this is some of the things that I'm trying to do in the cocoa sector, because now that I'm in the Cocoa Research Center.
This is where you're working now, yes.
Yeah.
So before we go on to the cocoa sector, though, I want to get this thing. So who has to do that to create the conditions for the development of breeders? Does the University of the West Indies have to do that? Does government have to do that? Or does it take a partnership of university, government, private sector to do that, in your estimation?
Yeah. So I have recently the government has appointed me as chairperson of a committee to look at this whole technology transfer process and where the gaps are, so that, you know, we can sort of fill this whole process so that, you know, you can develop commercial products. And one of the findings that we have found is that, you know, in the 70s and 80s, I don't know if you'll remember that time, universities were separated from agencies that were supposed to do developmental work. And this is the time when, you know, you had the Carries established, the CARDIs established, you have the Ministry of Agriculture programs established, you know. So basically, at the time, the basic notion was that, you know, university does the research, hands it off to another institution that now does the developmental work and commercializes stuff, and to the farmers and so on. So as you saw that institutionalizing of that whole technology transfer process, and these institutions over years develop what we call hard walls between them. And as a result, knowledge doesn't go from one institution to another institution to another institution, so that, you know, the whole thing works like a seamless thread. Now, in the US system, what they had done, they have realized this very early on, and they established what you call land-grant universities.
Yes.
And the land-grant universities, the whole emphasis was that you don't do research alone. You do research, development, and outreach in the same institution, so that the commercialization can happen, right, seamlessly. In the new system, like in the Silicon Valley, the universities have taken on the responsibility for doing cutting-edge research. But instead of going through these development agencies, they directly engage private sector to establish what they call spin-off companies, which the university has a role to play during the early developmental stages until they become commercially viable big companies, right? They can have their own research. So that has also spun out a complete Silicon Valley. So I think we have been caught about 20, 30 years behind, in terms of how things are moving in building technology transfer system. We need to, as a country, with limited resources, decide which of these systems work well for us, so that research can convert it into technologies and products so that they can be commercialized. And this sort of compartmentalization has not really helped. And
okay.
So this is some of the things that we have discussed in the paper that we developed for the cabinet. I think it's still at the cabinet level, looking at that whole technology transfer process and what are the opportunities that exist internationally, best practices, and which ones would suit a small island country like Trinidad and Tobago, so that we cannot continue to be in this dilemma of doing science and not commercializing anything, and continuing in the same track that we have done.
So we need a breakout strategy.
Yeah.
We need a breakout strategy that will lead from knowledge to applications to commercialization to investment to business creation, entrepreneurship, marketing, etc. You need a seamless process in order to make that possible. And we have the capacity now to do it for hot peppers, because we have a gene bank of about 400 varieties, and we have the know-how to do the hybridization that is necessary, but we also have the know-how and the capacity to do it for a number of the origination mechanisms for a number of tropical plants in this part of the world. Is that correct?
That's exactly, yeah. That's
all right. Thank you so much. We need to work out that because it's important. And I just have a couple of minutes now and I have to go to the news. But could you say something about cocoa research? And I want to give you the opportunity, if you are so inclined, to come back on the program and we will spend some time on the cocoa matter. But I simply want you to touch it now. Tell me what is happening with cocoa, where we are, what we are doing, and what is the potential of that?
Okay, I think we have tremendous opportunities in cocoa because Trinidad and Tobago was, in many countries, Trinidad and Tobago doesn't know this, but anywhere in the world where cocoa is grown, they consider Trinidad and Tobago as the Noah's Ark, because this is where cocoa originated. Technologies were developed and were transferred to the rest of the world, where cocoa is now being produced in larger quantities and so on. So Trinidad and Tobago has a reputation not only for the quality of cocoa that we produce, but also the knowledge and the genetic resources that we have given to the world, right? So there's a reputation that comes with that. But how do we capitalize on this? So because of my previous experience with all these crops that we talk about, bodi, black-eyed peas, pigeon peas, and peppers, and so on, I said that what we need in the cocoa industry, it's a science to commercialization platform, right? To commercialize this, and we conceptualized and developed what we called an international fine cocoa innovation center, which not only works on research, but also takes the research works with private sector collaboration to convert that research into commercial products and services that can be supplied to the rest of the world. So from the learnings that I've had throughout my career, I sort of trying to apply that in the cocoa world, so that, we can convert that. So probably in the next program, I can really talk about in much more detail what we have done and what we need to do to really make cocoa a standout opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, so you think, therefore, that with this International Fine Cocoa Center and the work that you are doing, you feel now that you are on the right track with cocoa?
Yeah, I think, because we consider this as an engine for growth, right? The Fine Cocoa Innovation Center, we are working with a lot of private sector companies, we have business incubators, we have technology incubators, we have the companies working with us on product development and breaking into markets. We are looking at branding opportunities for them. How do you build geographical indications, estate origin brands, and so on, so that we can take them into this very high-end niche market, which pays tremendous amount of resources. We have been traditionally very good at marketing cocoa beans, but we have been very poor in marketing chocolates, yes. Right? And that is the area where the money is, right? So we are trying to see how we can train chocolatiers, how we can handhold them to become international brands, so that we can really reach the international world with the very best quality of chocolates.
Thank you very much, Professor Umaharan. I hope you'll take up my offer to come back again so that we can continue the discussion. But this has really been a very rich conversation. And you realize in Trinidad and Tobago, really, how we spend all our time talking about irrelevancies in agriculture, rather than focusing on the connection between knowledge and research, and then moving through the chain into the production and eventually distribution and marketing system. And the level of, what can I say, pig-headedness which characterizes the conversation is really, really debilitating in this society. You have the same arguments going on over and over, rather than looking at the value chain, starting with research and knowledge, and then getting it to all the points that you need. The ultimate point being markets, of course, with products that you have, whatever they are, whether they are on the seed and plant generation side, or whether they are on the product side at the highest end of the market. So we will come back and have a conversation about this. I am very happy for the conversation that we've had. I want to thank you very much. And we will see you another time, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of the ideas.
And we break now, viewers, listeners, for the news with Chanel. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe, where we have serious conversations about serious issues having to do with Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean region, and the world. And we will continue this during the course of next week. And over now to Chanel with the news.